Good afternoon, Professor. Today, our group will present you about Chapter 1, The Origins of Psychology. We want to start with the history of psychology, and this is the learning objective. For the purpose of this module, we'll examine the development of psychology in America and use the mid-19th century as our starting point. Psychology is an exciting field, and the history of psychology offers the opportunity to make sense of how it has grown and developed. The importance of history in defining who we are cannot be understated. Whether you are seeing a physician, talking with a counselor, or applying for a job, everything begins with a history. The same is true for studying the history of psychology. Getting a history of the field helps to make sense of who we are and how we got there. A prehistory of psychology. Precursors to American psychology can be found in philosophy and physiology. Philosophers such as John Locke and Thomas Reid promoted empiricism, the idea that all knowledge comes from experience. The work of Locke, Reid, and others emphasized that the role of human observer and the primacy of the senses in defining how the mind comes to acquire knowledge. Physiology, and psychophysics. Philosophical questions about the nature of mind and knowledge were matched in the 19th century by physiological investigation of the sensory system of the human observer. German physiologist Hermann von Helmholtz measured the speed of the neural impulse and explored the physiology of hearing and vision. His work indicated that our senses can deceive us and are not a mirror of external world. Such work showed that even though the human senses were fallible, the mind could be measured using the methods of science. In all, it suggested that the science of psychology was feasible. An important implication of Helmholtz's work was that there is psychological reality and physical reality, and that the two are not identical. The question of the relationship between the mental and the material was investigated by a number of German researchers, including Ernest Weber and Gustav Fechner. Their work was called psychophysics, and it introduced methods of measuring the relationship between physical stimuli and human perception that would serve as the basis for the new science of psychology. The formal development of modern psychology is usually credited to the work of German physician, physiologist, and philosopher Wilhelm Wundt. Wundt helped to establish the field of experimental psychology by serving as a strong promoter of the idea that psychology could be an experimental field by providing classes, textbooks, and a laboratory for training students. In 1875, he joined the faculty at the University of Leipzig. In 1879, he complemented his lecture on experimental psychology with a laboratory experience, an event that has served as the popular date of the establishment of science of psychology. The response to the new science was immediate and global. Wundt attracted students from around the world to study the new experimental psychology and work in his lab. Students were trained to offer detailed self-reports of their reaction to various stimuli, the procedure known as introspection. The goal was to identify the elements of consciousness. The work of Wundt and his students demonstrated that the mind could be measured and the nature of consciousness could be revealed through scientific means. After the opening of Wundt's lab in 1879, it took just 4 years for the first psychology laboratory to open in the United States. Now I'm going to show you some meaning of the vocabulary. The first one is precursor, which means ancestor or the one who came first. Fallible means capable of making mistake or error. Introspection means self-examination. And the last one, consciousness, which means awareness.
Okay, so now it's my topic. My topic is scientific psychology comes to the United States. One's version of psychology alive in America most will be through the work of Edward Bedford Titchener. And in his theory said that if you got like a society and experience, you will got the behavior. And in the next topic, we go with toward the functional psychology. In this part, we will focus about the functionalism, and the functionalism is a theory about the nature of mental states according to functionalism. Mental states are identified by what they do rather than what they made it of. And in the next topic, I'm going to talk about the growth of psychology. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, psychology continued to grow and flourish in America. And now we got the new theory called Gestalt theory. In this theory, if we got like a society and experience and also the learning, you will got a behavior. And in this Gestalt psychology theory is what we are using in now.
The next psychologists, Kirk and Kenneth Kirk, they study the psychology of less demonstrated ways in physical situations negative impact the self-esteem of America children like that. Thank you for your attention to me. See you again next time. Bye bye. Okay, the next psychology is Kirk and Kenneth Kirk study the psychology of place demonstrate the way in physical situation. The last topic, but not less, psychological and society. Founded in 1936, the Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues (SPSSI) has supported research and action on the wide range of social issues. Individually, there have been many psychologists whose efforts have promoted social change. Are the next topics. Psychologists as a profession. As early as 1917, applied psychologists organized to create standards for education, training, and licensure. By the 1930s, this effort led to the creation of the American Association for Applied Psychology. While the American Psychological Association represents the interests of academic psychologists, American Association for Applied Psychology serves those in education, industry, consultant, and clinic work. From the World War II, in the quest of psychologists, specialists, the government before request the American Association for Applied Psychology and American Psychological Association to work together. Both focus on training in professional psychologists. Next psychologist, Lillian Gilbert, was a pioneer in industry psychology and engineering psychology. Working with her husband, Frank, they promote the use of time and motion study to improve efficiency in industries. The early 20th century was witnessed to rapid advance in applied psychology. Hugo Munsterberg of Harvard University made contributions to such areas as employee selection, eyewitness testimony, and psychotherapy. Henry Goddard, he supported the Alfred Binet test and the later Standards by Louis Terman at Stanford University. The assignment and meaning of intelligence has fueled debate in American psychology and society of nearly 100 years. The first one, applied psychology in America. In America, there has always been an interest in the application of psychology to everyday life. The modern intelligence test was developed by the French psychologist Alfred Binet. His goal was to develop a test that would identify school children in need of education support. Professor and my friends, my name is Manita Purimata Melfreshad. Today I'm going to present about Chapter 1, the origins of psychology. The topic that I responsibility today, there are 3 topics. The first one is applied psychology in America, and the second one is psychology as a profession.
So finally, about the conclusion. In American psychology, growth and expansion have been a very constant, and in the late of 20th century, the field of social developmental personality psychology and play very big role and contribute to our understanding about what it means to be human. So today, neuroscience enjoying tremendous interest and growth. So here is a briefly timeline about the psychology history. So first, in 16,000, the rise of empiricism, emphasizing centrality of human observer in acquiring the knowledge. In 1850, Hall measures neural impulse. In 1859, there is the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species. In 1879, there is a wide open lab for experimental psychology. In 1883, first psychology labs opened in the United States of America. And in 1887, first American Psychology Journal is published. The book is called American Journal of Psychology. In 1890, James published Principle of Psychology. In 1892, the APA established. In 1894, Margaret Floyd Washburn is the first U.S. woman to earn PhD in the psychology field. In 1904, they found a teenagers experimentalist. In 1905, Mary Whitton Calkins is first woman president of APA. In 1909, Freud only visited to the United States. In 1913, John Watson called for psychology of behavior. In 1920, Francis is the first African American to earn PhD in psychology. In 1921, Margaret Floyd Washburn is second woman president of APA. And in 1930, creation and growth of the American Association for Applied Psychology. Then, in 1936, they found the Society for the Psychology Study of Social Issues. In 1940, behaviorism dominates American psychology. In 1946, National Mental Health Act. In 1949, Boulder Conference on Graduate Education in Clinical Psychology. In 1950, cognitive psychology gains popularity. In 1954, Brown and Board of Education. In 1957, Evelyn Hooker published The Adjustment of the Male Overt Homosexual. In 1968, founding of the Association of Black Psychologists. In 1973, a psychology proposed at the Vail Conference on Professional Training in Psychology. And lastly, in 1988, they found the American Psychology Society, and we know now as the Association of Psychology Science. Thank you.
Vocabulary 1. Behavioralism. The theory that human or animal behavior is based on conditioning. 2. Cognitive psychology. The study of how people think. 3. Consciousness. The state of understanding and realizing some things. 4. Empiricism. The belief in using empirical methods. 5. Eugenics. The idea that it is possible to improve humans by allowing only some people to produce children. 6. Flashbulb memory used to explain how likely emotional events can be remembered with great clarity. 7. Functionalism. The principle that the most important things about an object such as a building is its use rather than what it looks like. 8. Justin psychology. An attempt to study the unity of experience. 9. Individual difference. Ways in which people differ in terms of their behavior, emotional, cognition, and development. 10. Introspection, a method of focusing on internal process. 11. Neural impulse, an electrochemical signal that enable neurons to communicate. 12. Practitioner scholar model, a model of training or professional psychologist that emphasize clinical practice. 13. Psychophysics, study of the relationship between physical stimuli and the perception of those stimuli. 14. Realism, a point of view that emphasizes the importance of the sense in providing knowledge of the external world. 15. Scientist practitioner model, a model of training of professional psychologists that emphasize the development of both research and clinical skill. 16. Structuralism, a school of American psychology that sought to describe the element of conscious experience. 17. Tip of the tongue phenomenon, the inability to pull a word from memory even though there is the sensation that the word is available.